Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, I'm Becky Parker Geist. I'm the host of Audiobook Connection, Behind the Scenes with the Creative Teams podcast. I am also the president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the CEO and founder of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks, providing audiobook and podcast production, distribution, and marketing. And I am so excited to bring today this episode, true family experience in all the ways I can think of. And we have today Leigh Allen, author of The Special Guest, A Christmas Story, Donna Campbell Allen, who is the illustrator for the book, and Esty Allen Williams, who is a daughter of Leigh and Donna, and we'll get all of that understanding as to why we're all here together in just a moment. So glad you're all here.
Hey, thank you, Becky. Nice to be with you. Christmas Eve. I'm not sure when this will go live or be recorded, but yeah, we're right there Christmas Eve.
That's right.
Nice to be with you, Becky.
And so we are recording this Christmas Eve and it will go live on Boxing Day. So we are wrapping it right around Christmas Day.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think it is so exciting and sort of very warm story that you've been able to share with me about how this story came about. Let's start there. Leigh, would you like to share?
Sure, absolutely. And it has, to your point, Becky, been kind of quite a unique family experience. And by the way, we are publishing the 30th anniversary edition, so I know time flies, right? Whatever. But I'll kind of give you the quick history and your listeners and viewers a quick history. And by the way, where I'm starting now, Esty was maybe a twinkle in my eye or something, but she wasn't quite around yet. Back in 1992, my two older children that were grade school age at the time, I wrote it for them. And it was an inspiration. I know people say that word a lot, but honestly, I sat down and it came out pretty quickly. Now, it was only 20 pages at the time, okay? But still, it was the full story. And so read it to not only my Justin and Ellie, my two children at the time, and Donna and I weren't married yet. So we'll get to that real quick. But also the larger family, more immediate, larger. Everybody loved it. Everybody said, oh, it would be a great book. I said, okay, put it on the shelf, right? Didn't do anything, but, just put it on the shelf. It was a keepsake for the kids, put it in a special book and all that kind of thing. Well, so 1994, Christmas of 94, Donna, you probably remember, I saw that article in People magazine, and it was about Rick Evans, who became known as Mr. Christmas, but he was a marketing exec out in Utah, so he kind of knew how to do it. But he wrote the same year, actually, I wrote The Special Guest. He wrote The Christmas Box, but he went on to self-publish when he couldn't get a publisher to take it. They said, there's no market for Christmas. We got a 250,000 distribution himself. But again, he was in marketing. Well, by the time he made People magazine, he had gotten a $4.3 million advance from Simon & Schuster, right? So I'm reading this article. Well, Donna was already talking about kind of one of her dreams was to be a children's book illustrator. I said, I tell you what, looking at, reading that article, I said, why don't we self-publish The Special Guest? You do illustrations. And we did in 1995. We subsidy published, found, how that works. We paid for it. But the cool thing was, and we're in Richmond, Virginia now, everybody. So there's a family institution, and they had about 20 supermarkets. It was called U-Crops. They were they really were an institution. So much they gave to the community, but they also really quite, Southern Baptist. Their dad never wanted to sell alcohol, didn't want to open on Sunday, kind of like Chick-fil-A, right? And the two brothers, after he was gone, still honored him. So, and we knew them because they were in the same, one of the brothers was in the same church. So went to them and said, guys, we've got Jim, Bobby, we've got this Christmas book. We'd like to display it in U-Crops. And they gave us really the red carpet. They let us have our own box display, floor display, in other words, not stuck on a shelf with whatever other books. And then we also wanted to donate to Angel Tree. So we contacted them and said, look, at the end the book was $6.95. We'd like to give, and we had to split it with distributors and all, but we took $1 per book and gave it to Angel Tree. Well, long story short, right there in Richmond, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, it sold 6,500 copies. We were able to write a check for $6,500. The national director of Angel Tree came down to Richmond to receive it. And believe me, the U-Crops, very big name, in the community. So they were there, part of the presentation. Later, we had a chance to meet Chuck Colson. So it's really been, and that's where it got started. And then just real quick, 96, somehow that word got up to New York publishers as those things go, Becky, and Hyperion. And, but we really loved Kensington's marketing plan. So we went with them. It was nationally distributed Christmas of 96. Same time, we started getting calls from movie people, Hollywood, right? We ended up allowing the producer for CBS Movie of the Week to option the movie. Okay, so that's all been way back when, 30 years ago.
Right, yeah.
And then I'm in business and Donna's in business. And, the movie option for 3 years, long story short, I think they ended up making a movie. As Hollywood does, it was so far removed from my original story that I kept the dramatic rights. I gave them chain of title, make what you want, don't use my book. So the vision this year, and we're already talking, I won't give a name, but with really a Hollywood mogul, he's produced 100 movies and over a dozen Christmas movies. So and he's very interested in what we've got. So knock on wood, all that. I hope that we'll have that moving forward in 2025. Now, just real quick, and Donna, you jump in because she's been such a part, and I think the illustrations add so much to the print. Can't do it with the audio book, but they do with the print. But that was one other thing I wanted to add. Okay, well, it'll come to me, so we won't worry about that right now. And then my daughter, Esty, I know what I was going to say about the family. So we're dedicating the 30th anniversary, this edition that's now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but we also have our own website. So let me tell the listener audience, they can go to the special guest, the title of the book, Christmas.com, and we're going to have this special, it's not just a paperback, it's custom with the French flaps, which is like a dust cover, right? Dust jacket that goes on a hardcover, and your audio book that you produced, your team produced, Becky, which is great. Whoever's listening, that is the best place to get it because it's the only place they can get the special French flap paperback edition. But what I was going to say is it's dedicated to our grandchildren. So we now have 5. We got married, about a year before we produced the...
We were married in 94.
Yeah, 94. So in 95, we spent that whole year, doing whatever you do to self-publish a book. The cool thing is with this 30th edition, we now have 5 grandchildren. Esty, we got 1 on the way, so we got 6. And so it's dedicated to the grandchildren. That's what I was trying to think of.
That's beautiful. And so, Donna, tell us just a little bit about your experience in terms of the creation of the illustrations. What was that process like for you?
Well, I spent almost 15 years in the retail advertising departments. And so as a fashion illustrator, the illustrations came easy to me, except that I wanted to give them really long arms, long legs. And in some of my illustrations, I still see that fashion figure trying to push its way forward.
Right.
So Lee and I pretty much used what we had. We asked a neighbor of ours to be Scott. And so he was our model. Lee's father was Zachary. And so we would just use what we had to work with.
Ellie was little Jenny in bed.
Yeah.
That's where the whole family came in. My brother, remember?
Oh, yeah.
He was Jake Castle. If you've seen the illustrations, right, Becky?
Yeah.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then his wife, Susan, was the lady at the door. Castle, Shannon Castle. Who else?
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these family members that were in the that she
who
used
were models for the characters.
Yes,
wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead. Keep going.
Go ahead, Becky. Go ahead. You go.
Well, I was just going to ask Esty. So you then grew up with this story already in the family as a book. What was your experience in growing up and having this family created book? Do you recall?
I was pretty young, so I don't think I remember too much of the big stuff, I could say. But I do, always remember hearing like the stories about the pictures, like the picture on the back of the book. I think I was in Mom's belly for that one, or maybe that was just
when we published the second time I was pregnant with you the second time. The first time I was pregnant with Sam. I'm pregnant in all of them.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing and seeing in terms of like the pictures on the back. And then, of course, just hearing about, the U-Crops family being involved and kind of just growing up hearing the stories about like them signing the books at like, was it CVS Pharmacy? You guys would
at the U-Crops, honey. There were about 20 stores, and during that Thanksgiving to Christmas, I think we'd go to about 2 a week and do a book sign. It was a lot of fun, actually.
It was more than that.
Oh, it was? Okay.
It was, because I was really pregnant at the time, trying to keep my feet up, trying to keep hydrated. I just remember it was a stretch for me. And we went into each store that would have us, and we would sit there, just kind of talk to the people going by. And it was just very fascinating to see who would stop and who wouldn't. And so I remember having conversations about that. But years later, people would say, I stopped. You signed my book. So that was pretty cool.
And you were carrying Esty when we did the National Book Tour then for 96, right? You were born in December 96, right?
No, Sam was born in...
He was January 96.
Esty is December of 97.
Okay, so you weren't pregnant when we were doing the book tour. Okay, yeah. I can't keep straight. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the story itself. First of all, I'm just curious, you said it came as sort of an inspiration, but was there anything that you recall being sort of that seed that was planted in your mind?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, because you're right. So there's always been this, to me, very mysterious scripture in Hebrews, the Bible, New Testament Hebrews, Hebrews 13:2, actually. And it says, don't forget to be kind to strangers, for some who've done so have entertained angels unawares. Well, the thing that's so odd about it, it's like that verse is just dropped in there with no context around it. And it's like, okay, but think how profound that is, that you could be entertaining an angel, okay? Now, Christmas time, it probably more than any other time, I think we're more cognizant or aware. We talk of angels from the Annunciation to the shepherds in the field, all of these places in that Christmas setting where it's angels, right? So it's really such a perfect time, I think. And you go back and you look at It's a Wonderful Life or The Bishop's Wife, if you know, those classic movies, both of them have an angel, kind of a sort of a comical one in It's a Wonderful Life with
Jimmy Stewart.
Well, yeah, Jimmy Stewart
Clarence.
with Clarence. Thank you.
Yep.
And then of course Cary Grant in The Bishop's Wife. So, as a matter of fact, I had not even seen The Bishop's Wife at the time I wrote the story. We had seen It's a Wonderful Life, and then our agent said, "This reminds me," and we'd never seen it. So the first thing we did, obviously, is watch that.
Right,
and I got to tell you that it was after I wrote the 1992 that Touched by an Angel, which became kind of a popular series, came out, but it wasn't. It was after I had written the story, so it really came from not even It's a Wonderful Life, but from that scripture in Hebrews. That's really what kind of. And to be honest with you, the other part was going through a divorce. I wanted my kids to have something about forgiveness, right? Because it's hard on kids to go through a divorce. So that was the other motive in what you saw. Fortunately, nobody was in jail, but it was, I know, right? But it was that message about forgiveness.
Yeah. And I want to say, although, the book is a Christmas story, it is a story that, when I read it, I think, this doesn't need to be Christmas. This is an everyday story. This is the kind of story that that phrase that I know I grew up with, that every day is Christmas, that we don't reserve the good feelings or the good deeds, especially for the holidays, right? That's something that we are called to at all times. And so regardless of whatever religious context we put ourselves in or choose to be in or believe in, that really that the message, this is one of the things I love about this story so much, is that the message is just a powerful message of forgiveness. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
And It's not, to your point, Becky, it's not a complicated story. It's not, it's a novella, really. In other words, it's, I think, 100 and some pages, I forget now. Right around 100 pages. And so it's not, but it's funny because I did another edition and I added, I think, about 60 pages. And I've had people come back to me and I thought, hey, I've kind of built it out and what have you, but they liked the original edition. So when we did this 30th, we went back to the original and it seems to really click with people, what have you. So, yeah.
One of the questions we were asked a lot during the National Book Tour was, is this a true story? Has this kind of thing happened to us? And at the time, I can tell you that Lee and I met most of our strangers at Christmas time.
Oh, interesting.
There are wonderful opportunities out there to meet people that can really be part of your lives. So one of the churches that we were affiliated with offered opportunities to adopt families. And so we met Richard. Richard was part of Estee's life, all of our children's lives, until he died. And we gave him a funeral.
But so tell them who Richard was.
Well, Richard went through the foster care system as an orphan. And after he aged out, he put himself on the streets.
Yeah.
And so there were some good, wonderful people that helped him get the benefits. He actually ended up in an apartment, but we made Richard part of our family for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
And then we also met Roberto the same way. Yeah. So Roberto and his family, Roberto was paralyzed from the waist down.
Yeah.
So we would pick him up, and again, I don't know, Esty, do you remember Roberto?
No, but I do remember Richard.
Yes. Roberto passed away before Richard, but Roberto drove from Richmond, Virginia to Connellsville, Pennsylvania for our wedding.
Yeah.
He spent all his money getting there, he and his wife. And I can't remember how word circulated, but my father found out that Roberto and his wife, after the wedding reception, they were going to drive back to Richmond. And it's a good 5.5 to 6 hour drive. So my father put him up in a hotel.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
He had breakfast with us the next morning.
I don't know. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we have met many wonderful people who've played a part in our lives for many years afterward, after meeting them as strangers.
Becky, we were talking about it for this holiday and the grandchildren. And to the point of the family, we really see this as like our heritage, that it becomes part of the family saga once we're gone, legacy, once we're gone, kind of thing. And the grandchildren continue. And so it's really exciting, honestly, to republish, if you will, this 30th edition with the audiobook. Now, way back, remember they used to use cassettes?
Yeah.
So way back, there was a cassette, okay? But I think the audiobook now, and everything being online, which is a little different from 96. I don't think it was quite as much, back then. So really, this edition, with all the history behind it, is really special to us, and I think to our family. And now Estee's grown. Behind her is Christiana, and then Sam above her, and then my two older ones. So now I think everybody can, in a way, appreciate it more because they either weren't around or they were very small back then. And I think if we can, on the bucket list, as they say, my bucket list has been the movie. I really feel like the time is right. And I would love for this to become a modern day classic, like we think of It's a Wonderful Life. That's our favorite movie.
Yeah.
So that's the dream.
That absolutely seems like the right move. It feels like that's where it's headed. Yeah. Estee, I want to just get your take on what that has been like for you growing up, knowing that your family would meet people and bring them in and really embrace, these strangers at first. And how did that impact you?
Well, I think it's part of, the Holy Spirit working within our family. And like Dad and Mom were saying, like, you never know when you're going to come across an angel. And, whether it's, somebody on the corner of the street asking if you have a little bit of spare change, or, going into the church and seeing who you can help or bring into your family. And I would say a lot of people wouldn't do that because of reasons, or just not, their heart is not probably, I guess, where Mom and Dad's are. And I think that really shows a great example to be kind to strangers and help as needed, and really think about generosity and how you can help put out the word of Jesus too. I mean, I'm sure Mom and Dad really spoke to Richard, and that's who I remember most. It probably spoke to him about like God, and, showed him the Bible more, and really just welcomed him in our home. And I do remember him a little bit. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of cool.
And to Estee's point, and Estie, you probably know, I hope we instilled, we had this tradition that you never went by someone, you find them on the street corners, right? Like at a traffic light, and always giving them, people come up, I bet they go back to a mansion or something ridiculous instead of, who would stand out there and go back? You know what I mean? But what really gave me a warm feeling, so our middle son, athlete, he quarterbacked out at San Jose State. When he was out there, he was in junior college, and there was this poor girl, I swear. So she needed more than $1. We walked out of a drugstore, and she's sitting there shivering in Victor Valley. It was very cold, desert kind of wind and all. So, and the police came, we called the police, we called the emergency, nobody did anything. So we put her up in a hotel. But provided for her, kind of connected to a church that could help her, like these churches. But here was the thing that was touching to me. My son, Sam, had another opportunity and did that on his own. I kind of learned late. So, you kind of instill, right, Estie? These principles in your kids, and so that
it ripples out. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Let's take a short pause, and then we're going to come right back and talk a little bit more about the story and the audiobook. This is a story befitting the most wondrous time of the year. A time when we lift our heads from the day-to-day grind of life to look at humanity with our spiritual eyes. When we rejoice to hear the bells chime a message of hope for the world. When we look to believe there really is more to this world than just what we can see and hear with our natural senses. Open the special guest and enter a world we all want to believe to be true. Someone once said, to feel the brush of the supernatural is to experience firsthand the heavenly messengers at work around us. This beloved story will renew your faith in miracles. Even more important, it will renew your faith in your fellow man. Get your copy of The Special Guest, A Christmas Story. Visit thespecialguestchristmas.com. Or you can get your audiobook copy on Amplify Audiobooks. Get it today. You'll be missing out if you don't. And we're back. So, Esty, let's actually start with you. I would love to hear from you, like, if you have a favorite moment or favorite element of the story of the special guest. Do you have a favorite moment or in that story?
Well, actually, my husband and I are just now reading it together.
Okay.
Never read it, so we are reading it this holiday season. So I don't have my answer for that yet because we're actually still in the beginning of it. But I know it took me forever to start it just because I'm not the biggest book reader. But yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that.
But that's why we have the audio book too, right, Becky? So
that's right.
She's going to be getting that hopefully here in the next 24 hours, Esty, because we have all that straight. Yeah, so okay.
Yeah. Great. All right. And Donna, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you have a favorite moment in the story?
I was touched by so many of them. Just the idea that this young boy, Scott, the son of Ellen and what's his name? Max Reed, would reach out to and notice that Zachary was just a little odd and maybe did need a little bit of help. We're just so worried about strangers today. But as Esty said, the Holy Spirit really does let you in on what he wants to do. And so there's just that moment where the Reeds really need a miracle. And through their son who feels empathy for this older gentleman who seems harmless and is harmless. So it's kind of like it was a little bit of a test, wasn't it? And so Scott passed the test. Of course, he had to bring it home to his mom and dad, who agreed with him to allow Zachary to come into their lives, not knowing that he was going to be one of their greatest blessings at a time when they so needed it.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll to what Donna was just saying, to me, that setting, U-Crops, food crops. So we talked about the U-Crops supermarket. But for example, Zachary, who's the stranger, who's the guest, is driving a 1949 Packard. Well, my grandfather drove a 1949 Packard. So it was fun to insert these different elements. My dad came back from Germany back in the 50s. The Hamburg was a popular type. So I've got Zachary in a Hamburg. So those kinds of elements. And I think my most enjoyable was that development. And the idea, when movie producers hear about a story or book, that tagline, the hook, that's the first thing they look at. Am I hearing something that maybe hasn't been done yet? And I think that the tagline for this, we talked about entertaining, is the idea, you said how it was a test. The idea that Scott, the young 16-year-old boy, wants to help this man that he's watched all afternoon out in the blustery cold And it's like, does he have Alzheimer's or what have you? But not knowing that that man is there for him.
Right, right.
You know, that supernatural element, I think, is what you're talking about. That, to me, I'll be honest with you, always gives me tingles, because I think all of us, the idea of a visitation that's supernatural, for most of us, I think that would be an incredible experience, right? And so it kind of gives you that tingle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll share with you what my favorite moment is. And there are so many beautiful, rich, lovely, emotional moments. But one of my favorites, personally, is the moment where Max, the father, is faced with the opportunity where he's angry, he's upset with good reason about what happened to his daughter. And he's put in a position where he's being asked to forgive.
Yeah.
And that's no easy task.
Right.
And the moment when he is just given that little gentle nudge, that little gentle idea, the recognition that there's a bigger picture. There's something more going on. And if he can just open his heart to that, something might be possible.
Nice. Yeah.
And it just feels like this, like, to me, that is this, that slight opening of the heart is what makes the miracle possible that happens. And I won't give any spoilers here, but it is
definitely giving some hints, haven't we? But, you know.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story.
And if I could add this, Becky, whenever we're getting ready to close, I want to tell you there's a sequel coming, and Zachary, when they're after the play, right, and they've brought the Fincastle children right to the play, and you're right. I won't take credit. I believe it was inspired, but what's that saying?
To err is human, to forgive is divine.
Yeah, that's
the
Yeah. And we've probably all heard that scripture, but to your point, Becky, it does take something supernatural, because the idea of forgiving means we've been harmed, we've been somehow, hurt, and so we're being asked to do something that doesn't feel natural. Otherwise, by definition, it wouldn't be an issue, right? But it is.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So when they're all sitting around that night, it's Christmas Eve, and they've come back from the play, Zachary tells us an interesting story that I took that and I've now created the sequel, which will be coming out. I'm just going to give that hint this coming, Christmas of 95. And I hope your listeners and audience and all will want to follow the movie project. So if they go to the special guest Christmas.com, they'll see where they can join a newsletter, and we'll keep everybody updated on the progress with the movie. I wanted to say this, Becky, and my dear sweet daughter Esty. I have 3 daughters. We have 3 daughters, all incredible. All our kids were very blessed. But in her own right, and not only, we were talking about family and what have you, is she's really, if I might say, Esty, become I call it the poster girl, but she's been on Dr. Phil and these other programs because however, she decided to start promoting. I think she fell in love and said, you know what, I love the idea of being a traditional wife, right, Esty? And she makes beautiful videos and has huge following. And so we've asked her to come on because at the same time, I think her audience will enjoy hearing of the opportunity, to be introduced to the special guest. So Esty, I want to thank you for joining us, especially not feeling well,
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I'm glad I was able to join in.
Yeah. And Esty, if you'd like to share what, the social media platforms where our listeners could find you, because I know that you've got something special available to them through your channels. Could you tell them where to find you?
Yeah. My usernames on just about everything is SDC Williams. So ESTEEC Williams at YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. That's just about all I do. So yeah.
Great.
You do?
No, I don't do Facebook.
Okay. All right, great. And then just quickly, Lee, you had mentioned it earlier, so not asking for a repeat or anything, but we had chatted about when you brought the audiobook project to us, it was, I think, late November, so we were on a very tight time frame.
Maybe even December.
Tell us.
I don't know,
Yeah. Tell our listeners just a little bit about what that process was like.
Everybody says, hey, you got a great voice, and I've done podcasts and all that. So anyway, and this is to Becky's credit. So I go to a studio that Becky, you set up in Virginia Beach, because we're in Virginia. And I go to the studio and start recording. And I think I got to chapter 3, and I said, okay, I can see this is beyond my talent level here. So, Becky, your team was gracious enough to jump in, I think that same week, with your voice, which, folks, is very talented. It's amazing to me how you can make these almost schizophrenic personality changes, right? It's just, whatever. Guess you ought to hear, she can sound like one of these little elves up in the North Pole. It's like, how do you do that? And then, of course, Zachary, you got a distinctive voice for that. So, yes, I'm very impressed with the production level. Really, I am. And we didn't use AI. These are real voices. I know you can use AI these days, but to me, there's something about, it's like as a writer, I tried about 6 AI programs. It's not me. It's not my voice. And, no pun intended there, but it's not my voice. And I'm sure it's the same that you feel with the audiobooks you create, that it's real human voice with
real humans.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so I think, and even though I know it's my title, Becky and her team honestly have done. So anybody, I don't know whether this goes out to authors, but any authors, I would recommend you do audiobook, not just the print book, because it's become more and more popular. I checked it out, and it's 20% of book sales. Well, guys, there are a lot of books out there. So even if you're 20%, that's a huge niche of the overall publishing market, right? So it's very worthwhile, I think, to add your audiobook to your print book.
Great. Thank you. It's time for us to wrap it up, but I want to thank you so much. Lee Allen, author of The Special Guest, A Christmas Story, Donna Campbell Allen, the illustrator, and SDC Williams, daughter extraordinaire and traditional wife on social media. Thank you so much. For our listeners, just a reminder, the place to go is thespecialguestchristmas.com, and you can keep up with get all the links for the audiobook, the print book, and keep up with the news on the film, because we're looking forward to that. I think it's a true upcoming Christmas holiday classic in the making.
Thank you so much, Becky.
You.
We enjoyed the opportunity to share, honestly.
Thank you, Becky.
And Esty, thanks for joining us too.
Thanks, honey.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.